All right, welcome back to our final episode in this series. In the previous episode, we actually had finished off our calculator app. It is completely functional at this point. And I told everybody, look, like if you're done here, you can quit. And this episode right here, this is the extra credits episode I promised was coming. So in this episode, what we're going to do is we're going to go through and we're going to systematically update everything in our app to make it so it looks as close as we can without killing ourselves to the actual calculator app that ships on your iPhone. So we're going to go ahead and get started. If we come up here and we open this right panel here, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to fix this 0 button. Now, if you remember, we had an issue here where we wanted it to be left aligned, but we wanted it to be left aligned with the 1 button, not center aligned like it was by default. So if you come down here to the controls and you do alignment and you make it left aligned, you can see that it snaps all the way to the left edge. And that was the problem that I promised we'd fix. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump over to code and we're going to inset it just a little bit so that the 0 aligns with the number 1 right above it. Now, I've already written the code. If you remember, I injured my hand, so to save us some time, I'm going to go ahead and show you here what I've already written. I'm creating an outlet just like the same way we did before with our label. I'm creating an outlet for each of our buttons. Now the outlet previously for our label was so that we could change things about the label. So we're going to do the exact same thing here. We're going to do IB outlets for every single one of our buttons that we're going to update. So that's all of our arithmetic buttons, the 0 button, basically everything except for the number buttons. So let's start with the 0 button. If you go ahead and create this outlet, we're going to go back over to our storyboard and we're going to wire up our button to our code here. So we come up here to the view controller and let's see, I'll go ahead and clear that so it looks like how you'll see it. You just drag this over here to the 0 button to connect it, and you can see it just connects up here in this panel. And you can see I've gone ahead and I've wired up all of them. So if you want to go ahead and do that now, if you're following along, go ahead and do that. Just create one for each of those buttons. All right, so let's jump back over here to the code. In our viewDidLoad function, we're going to come down here, and I've added this one line. So now we can reference our 0 button in code. So self.0button.titleEdgeInsets. Now the title edge insets are just a way of insetting the title of the text so that it's not right on the edge. So when it goes to lay out the text isn't laid out relative to the exact edge. So in this case, you've got UI edge insets, and you can do top, left, bottom, and right. UI edge insets is just a class that encapsulates this idea of insetting. And so in our case, we're going to initialize a UI edge insets object with a left edge of 30. So if we go ahead and run it, you'll see that what is reflected here is a 0 button that is inset from the left edge, just enough that it lines up with everything else. All right, now let's go on to the next thing here. So if we jump back over here to our storyboard, if you haven't connected up the rest of your buttons, you want to do that now. We've already got all of the arithmetic buttons wired up, including the percent and the plus minus buttons. Now you'll notice that the symbols, they're pretty good. They're what we typed in a previous episode. We even looked up Unicode characters to type in here. But Apple has actually provided something called SF symbols, which is San Francisco symbols. And this is a way of having a nice, clean drawing for each of these icons. And Apple has provided loads of them. So let's jump over here. This is a free app you can just download from their website. And you can see it's just thousands and thousands of icons that they use all over the system. And so if I search up here for plus/minus, and I happen to know what this one is already called because I've searched it before, and you'll see up pops the plus/minus icon that you might recognize from the calculator app. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do for each of these buttons, we're going to make them use the correct symbol. Now, so the first thing is we've already set the text color to white for each of these buttons. What we want to do, though, is we're going to set what's called the tint color. Now, the tint color is what's going to apply to images that need to be colored, whereas the text color obviously applies to the text. So if we come down here, we click on the color picker, we can change this to a black color for the plus minus. And it won't update because obviously here in the storyboard it's still using the text. We haven't used any icons yet. So we're just going to go through and make sure that each of these is set correctly. So the arithmetic buttons need to be set to white still, whereas the clear button needs to be set to black in the text color, because that's one that we're not going to actually replace. Just the important thing to remember here is that for the ones that are going to be icons, you need to make sure the tint color is set correctly. And for the ones that are going to stay text, that the text color is set. So plus minus going to be set to black, percent going to be set to black, and then all the arithmetic buttons are going to be set to white. All right, so let's jump back over here to code. Now we're going to introduce two concepts here. One is arrays and the other is tuples. Now, tuples are just a way of pairing things together without actually writing a class or a struct for them. An array is just a way of keeping a list of things. So in this case, we have created a tuple here, a list of tuples that's going to pair buttons with a string. And so here you can see these brackets indicate our array, and then these comma separated values, these are the elements inside our array. And you can see these strings here, percent, plus, minus, equals, divide. Now you'll probably recognize that one right here, plus, dot, slash, dot, minus. That is the name that we searched for in SF symbols. And if you're trying to guess ahead, that is right. Every single one of these is the name of an icon from SF symbols. So in this case, we're pairing UI buttons with the names of things from SF symbols, so strings. If we go through it, you can notice each of these buttons are just buttons that we wired up above that correspond to buttons in our storyboard. So yeah, add goes to plus, subtract goes to minus. And so you can even see if we, obviously we have the plus dot slash dot minus here in SF symbols. That's where we got the name from, in case you're wondering. Okay, so right now the code itself doesn't actually do anything. It just creates a list called names. But what we can do here is we can do what's called looping through every item in the array. So we can say for each item, in this case button and name, so for each item in the names list, our names array, we can do something with it. And so in this case, for each button and name in our names array, do something. And you can see these curly braces indicate the scope of what is going to be done for each item. And so basically what we're going to do is we're going to create a configuration, an image, and then we're going to clear out the title from our storyboard, and then we're going to set the image on the button. But let's take this one line at a time here. So your config, let's do that first. Your symbol configuration is a way of configuring which SF symbol you want, because there are different versions. Now this is some interesting syntax here. We have UIImage.symbol configuration. And what this is UIImage is a class. It's a class that represents basically every image you're ever going to work with in iOS. And then symbol configuration is a class that is interior to UIImage. So just the same way you can put variables and functions inside a class, you can also put other classes inside classes. And that's useful, especially when like a class is really only relevant or useful when used in conjunction with the class that it has been declared inside of. So that's how you access this class within a class, is UIImage.symbol configuration. And what we're going to do is we're going to initialize a symbol configuration just like we've initialized objects before. And it takes two parameters. One is the point size and the other is the weight. And the reason why those are the two parameters is because SF symbols are treated very much like text, where the point size is treated sort of like the text size that you would have. And the weight is like a thin, a medium, a bold. And so in our case, I just picked medium. I thought medium looked pretty close to what the calculator app does. And then the point size is just a point size of 20. So anyway, we go ahead, we initialize our configuration, and we're going to use that configuration to actually get an image. So in this case, we're actually initializing a UI image this time around. And the parameters to initialize a UI image are the name of the symbol that you want, or what they're calling the system name, and then also the configuration. And the configuration will tell you the point size and the weight of the symbol that we want. So in this case, name comes from up here in our list of names. So if we go by each one of these, it's percent, plus, minus, equal, divide, multiply. And then the config is this config just from this line right here above it. And so the resulting image that we get, we're going to use, we're going to clear the title. So button has a function on it called setTitle. And in this case, we're going to set the title to nil. Nil just clears out the title. It sets the title to nothing. And then we could talk about what the state normal means, but that's a whole other lesson. So just use normal, trust me on this one. And then button has also another function for set image. So in this case, we've set the title to nil or nothing, and we're going to set the image to the image that we just created, which is going to be the image that we got from the San Francisco symbols library. And so now you can see, once we run our code here, there is a slightly different, let's pull up the storyboard. You can actually see the difference here. There's actually a slight difference. You can see the plus minus obviously is very different. But the multiply is not an X anymore. It's clearly like a multiply with nice thin lines. We've got some rounded corners on the ends of our lines here. The plus minus is entirely different. And that's because the symbol we were using before actually has a different mathematical meaning. It was just the closest we could type at the time. So we've already got something that's looking really close. You can even see the colors that we updated in our storyboards, the black is working. And so if you're following along and your colors are wrong, it's because you haven't set the tint colors in your storyboard. Remember, the tint color is for the images, whereas the title color is for any text that can be in a button. You have to set those separately. All right, so let's jump back over to the code. We can close this panel because we don't need it anymore. And we're going to introduce what's called a number formatter. And a number formatter is really nice because it lets us format a number into something that looks human readable. It looks like what you'd expect from a number. Now we're going to introduce something a little weird here. We've had variables before, but in this case, we're going to initialize a variable using a little block of code here rather than setting it directly. So we've got our let number formatter, which is just declaring a number formatter variable, and the colon number formatter says that it's going to be of the number formatter class. But in this case, rather than just immediately declaring a number formatter, we've got these open close curly braces and then open close parentheses, which basically will make this little block of code run like a function. And then the result that comes out of that will be assigned to the variable. So this is just like a fun way of creating something and then maybe doing some configuration on it, setting some preferences, and then returning it. So if we come up here, this first line in this little block of code is let formatter equals number formatter. And this is like what a normal variable assignment looks like. We're just creating a number formatter. And if you were not doing any configuration, we could have just done this and gone rid of this entire block of code. We wouldn't need it. But we're going to do some configuration. We're going to change this a little bit here. So there's a couple things to know. If we're going to format our numbers and we're going to make them look nice, there's a few things to consider. Now, the first is the locale. A user's locale represents some properties about where they're currently at, what their phone is set to. So in the case of numbers, you might be aware that like in the United States, to represent 1,000, it's 1,000, but other countries, it's going to be 1.000. So that's what the locale is. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to tell the number formatter to use that grouping separator. That's what they call that. It's a grouping separator. And we're going to set the number style to be decimal. Now, we can do all sorts of things with number style, but for now, we're going to leave it as decimal style. But now, if you want to play with number formatter, you can play with that. All right, and then finally, you just have to return the formatter. And as long as your formatter is being returned to this function, it will actually, the end result will be that number formatter will be saved into that number formatter variable for this view controller, which means that we can then use it later down in our code. So in our previous lesson, we talked about ShowText. And ShowText, we said, if we make this a function, we can put all sorts of stuff in it to make our text show up correctly. And that's what we're going to do, is we're going to take advantage of the fact that everywhere in our class is calling this ShowText, and we're going to make it show text correctly. So we have an if. So if text is empty, display 0. What we're going to introduce is an else if. So this is a way of adding now 3 cases to our if statement. So in this case, if the text that we want to display can be converted into a number, and then we've seen this if let syntax before, But if we do comma let, we can actually see we can do this for multiple variables. So if our text can be converted into a number, and if our number formatter can create a string out of the number. So this is a way of taking what the user's typed, turning it into a number, and then formatting that number into a human readable set of text that's actually going to be slightly different from what the user typed in. Because the user might have typed in 1000, and what the number formatter will create is 1,000. And so the number formatter, the reason why we actually have to have this wrapped in here is the number formatter doesn't know that what you're passing it necessarily can be turned into a string. And so it is an optional. And so this is what this does, is it makes it so that if the number that we have in fact been passed in can be converted into text, then we're going to assign it to the label. So let's go ahead and run this and see the end result of here. I think that might be easier to understand. So we type in 1000, and you'll see that this comma that the user did not type in is being displayed here. And this makes it look a lot more professional, I'd say, but also more like the calculator app that comes on iOS. It's just, it reads better. You have this nice separator. There's just lots of great things about it. Plus, you get to see this number formatter class in action here. All right, so here's our last thing that we're going to do. We've got this function that I've created that's an IB action function, so it can be accessed from our storyboard. It's called didSwipe. And if you remember from one of our very early lessons, I talked about how we have this area at the top that'll be used for swipe gestures. So that's exactly what we're going to do, is we're going to create this function that when the user swipes, it deletes the last character that they typed. So in this case, if the user input .count, remember that tells you how much they've typed, is greater than 0. So if they've typed anything at all, then take the user input and remove the last character that they've typed. And this is just a handy function on a string that lets you drop the last character from the I guess the right hand side if you were reading it like a normal English text. And then finally, we're going to call our ShowUserInput function. So we come back over here, and we're going to hit this plus button in our storyboard, and we're going to type in swipe to get a swipe gesture, and we're going to drag out 2 of them. And we're going to put it in this top area that we created, this view that we created here, and it should highlight like normal, and you'll see them appear on the left. And so what we want to do is we want to open this side panel, and you can see that one of these is going to be right, and the other one is swipe left. So if they swipe left or right, we've got a gesture for both of these. And then if we control click on our view controller, you'll see that we'll have our action here at the bottom. Let's see if we can find it. Oh, there it is. All right, there's our did swipe. And so what we're going to do is we're going to drag this over to swipe gesture number 1, and then we're going to drag this one over to swipe gesture recognizer number 2. So now we have 2 swipe gesture recognizers wired up to the same function, which is super handy because we actually want both the gestures to do the exact same thing. So now with either of those are swiped, this function will be called, and it'll go through and do our deletion logic here. So let's run this and see it in action. Type in 100. If you swipe right or left, you can see that it just deletes the last character. Because the comma was coming from our number formatter, it's not counted as one of the deleted characters, and so all our code is playing nice, looking really professional. And we have a really great looking calculator app. All right, well, I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial series. It's been awesome making it for you. And I'm really excited that we have this fully functioning, really nice looking calculator app finished. It's a great way to start your road to becoming a developer using Swift and Xcode. Now, for future lessons, I'd love to see you stick around, so like and subscribe for future episodes, especially if you're a beginner. We want to go ahead and cover a lot of beginner topics. We want to help you really develop as a developer, be able to actually, potentially make a career out of this if this is something you're interested in. If you have a specific topic you would like to cover, go ahead and leave that in the comments below. If you have a specific app that comes on your phone maybe, or an app that you've seen on the App Store and you want to learn how to make it, let me know that in the comments too. I'd love to make more videos like this where we go through and we break down how real production professional apps are made so that you can build not only a portfolio of apps that you've created, but also just the confidence that you can create something that looks the same, if not is exactly the same as the apps that professionals are out there making. All right. So it was great working here with you guys on this tutorial, and we'll catch you in the next one.